This is Lama Tantrapa. Thank you for joining me for this first webinar of our Qigong Coaching Certification Program, which is part of the apprenticeship program at the Academy of Qidao. First of all, I want to thank you for joining our program, for making the commitment to go through this process of exploring and discovering for yourself the magical skills of Qigong coaching, and also learning how to become a Qigong coach for other people. So you're no longer practicing the energy arts for your own sake. You're also practicing energy arts for the sake of other people, for expanding your sphere of influence and creating a greater contribution for the humanity and all the living beings. This is something that has been an aspiration for me, and I hope it serves as an aspiration for you. Today, we are going to explore, first of all, what Qigong coaching is, how it's different from Qigong training or Qigong therapy, and also how it's different from other types of coaching. We'll also look at some of the fundamental principles of Qigong coaching and to see how we can start developing greater understanding of integration of different principles in such a way that we see that they don't contradict each other. They actually support and empower each other. And this is the name of the game, essentially. We learn how to experience empowerment for ourselves and how to provide greater experience of empowerment to other people. As a matter of fact, when people ask me, so why do you practice this art? I often say, well, in my book, the first book on Qidao, I wrote that the more people we empower to manifest and live their dreams, the more people help us manifest and live our dreams. So, in a sense, it's not completely altruistic endeavor. We also benefit a great deal from coaching others. One of the major principles that we're going to explore is that we're not separate. There is a sense of oneness that we experience. And the more we recognize that oneness, the more we capitalize on it, the greater sense of unity we experience, not only with each other, but with the whole universe, with the whole world that we live in. So, on this note, let's dive into the distinctions between Qigong therapy and Qigong coaching, and understand how there is perhaps also some degree of connection or unity that exists between them. One of the things about Qigong therapy that you may be familiar with is that it's a way of applying energy awareness and certain energy skills of the therapist to affect the health and vitality of the client that they receive therapy. Sometimes it also includes a client's engagement, so it may not be always passive. It may sometimes be relatively active, therapeutic application, but it still relies on the therapist as the primary acting party. And the client is the receiving and often a passive party. On the other hand, Qigong coaching offers much more active engagement of the client, where a coach doesn't try to manipulate the client's energy, doesn't try to fix them, doesn't even try to make that energy of the client somehow better, because there's nothing really wrong with the client in the first place. Now, sometimes people say, oh yeah, there is something really wrong with me. I'm sick, or I am hurt, or something else is going on with me that makes me suffer. And we realize that all of these health issues can be addressed through therapy, but sometimes coaching actually has a more effective therapeutic effect, even though it's not trying to fix the problem. Why? Because we don't perceive the health issue as the problem in itself. Of course, people experience pain, people experience all kinds of sickness and all kinds of emotional turmoil and disturbance, which they perceive as problems. In Qigong coaching, as I will dive a little bit deeper into it later in our webinar, you will see that we perceive everything not as a problem, but as an opportunity to learn and grow. Of course, there may be pain, but even pain doesn't have to be perceived as a problem. Of course, we may be suffering, and suffering doesn't have to be perceived as a problem. We perceive all our challenges as learning opportunities. There is a term, spiritual ordeal. So we can actually consider that all our challenges are essentially a spiritual ordeal that we accept if we are on a path of enlightenment. We accept our challenges so that we can learn from them and grow in a way that we don't repeat the same steps that we repeated in the past, or we learn how to achieve something that we wanted to achieve, or simply how to navigate around the obstacles that we no longer even perceive as obstacles anymore. We perceive them as landmarks on our journey. And when we arrive to each of them, that's the turning point where our journey needs to turn in one way or another. And so that changes the attitude entirely. Yes, of course, we want to experience greater wellness. Of course, we want to experience greater health. But instead of perceiving health issues as problems, we learn how to perceive them as learning opportunities. Therapists may sometimes use similar attitude, but in most cases, therapy still relies on the therapist knowing something that the client doesn't know and trying to affect the client in a way that they think is right. Coach, unlike the therapist or the doctor, doesn't assume that he or she knows what's best for the client. Instead, we learn how to assess where the client is, where they are in relation to where they would like to be. Often there may even be a difference between where they want to be and where they need to be. And so we help them resolve the discrepancy between the two. We'll delve into that in our future webinars. And once we identify that, there is a difference between where we are at the moment, the current state of affairs, versus the dream state, where the person wants to be. And then we basically chart the course, how to get from here to there. And eventually, we're bringing the current state and the dream state in unity, or we integrate them into one integral, unified way of being that also means that there is no difference between dream state and the current state of affairs. It literally means that you are in the dream. Now that is the profound transmission that you just received. It literally means that you learn how to live your dreams. Or your clients will learn how to live their dreams as you empower them to do so. The interesting thing about it is that we also use the terminology of dreaming in place of the terminology of goals and goal setting and pursuit of goals. Now, of course, a lot of people, especially in the beginning of the year, tend to think of goals as New Year's resolutions or certain pursuits that they want to achieve in their lives over the course of the year. Understandable. But the funny thing about it is that when people pursue goals, Goals are often extrinsically motivated. They often are not our own dreams. They're somebody else's dreams that got downloaded into our consciousness, or even more correctly, into our unconscious mind. Probably during the upbringing or education or indoctrination. Then we start pursuing other people's dreams instead of pursuing ours. Even if we manifest them, we still aren't happy because our own dreams are still unmanifest. We still don't have our needs met. And so pursuing goals often is not the primary objective of our art. We actually learn how to identify our dreams, and then we learn how to manifest them and live our dreams. So we learn how to develop a much greater awareness of dreaming, both daydreaming and night dreaming. As you know, a major part of my teachings is called dream yoga. We will learn how to become more skilled at dream yoga and how to apply the principles of dream yoga to the art of Qigong coaching. I also developed the methodology of dream yoga coaching, which is very closely related to Qigong coaching. Essentially, everything in dreams is made of energy, whether we're talking about night dreams or daydreams. So when we're thinking of something that we would like to manifest, certain ideas, certain aspirations, certain visions, those are dreams. And we can apply the awareness of energy and the principles of dream yoga towards manifestation of those dreams. If we know how to do that, it becomes much easier to manifest dreams than pursue goals, especially once we realize that achieving a particular goal often doesn't even feel that exciting because we realize there is another goal already calling our attention, or we already feel like we're not quite satisfied having achieved one goal because we realize that our needs are still not met. And so we keep on setting new goals and pursuing more and more goals. In other words, we're never satisfied. Or some people think, once I achieve this particular goal, I'll be happy. Well, so similarly, they never get happy because they never experience happiness as a result of hitting certain goals. What we learn is how to switch from using the terminology of goals and way of thinking about things as goals and actually start perceiving them as dreams, which addresses the true nature of the experience. That's exactly what happens when we think of something we want to manifest in our lives in the future. We are dreaming, daydreaming. What does it mean? It means that we actually call the process by its true name. We are addressing the true nature of what's going on in our consciousness. And that's exactly what allows us to tap into much deeper meaning of the process. We begin to actually utilize it much more fully, and we get much better results. And not only is Qigong coaching distinct from Qigong therapy, and as I said, also there are some similarities as well. There is another application of energy arts called teaching Qigong or Qigong instruction. And sometimes people confuse Qigong instruction for Qigong coaching. Why? Because they think that in both cases, the one person works with another person in the capacity of a teacher, mentor, or coach. And so the person who's receiving coaching or instruction is getting better. Now, the funny thing about it is that, yes, there are certain similarities. Also, it's important to point out that there are certain distinctions, such as instruction or teaching virtually always implies that the teacher or instructor knows better than the student about particular subject matter. And so the teacher is going to instruct the student, basically download into the student's brain certain instructions. And the better the student soaks in those instructions and becomes capable of repeating verbatim or replicating certain moves in a way similar to the instructors, the better the student is. If the student is not doing it the way that the instructor does, that's bad. So the student either flanks the test or doesn't get promoted into the new level of training, or basically considered not a good student. And what we do instead of downloading information, we inspire and motivate the student to experiment, to discover for themselves what works and what doesn't work. Of course, as a coach, you may know certain principles that the client doesn't know, and you can empower them to test those principles. When you go through the battery of tests, you essentially reinvent the wheel. But that is a wonderful thing, because you'll never forget how the wheel works if you have reinvented it. If you just receive certain download, memory is fleeting. Usually people retain only a small percentage of data that they received. And some people are more prone to learn kinesthetically versus auditorily versus visually. So depending on your teaching style, the students may receive different level of transmissions from you. It also may be the case of the student not being a really fast learner. Some people are really fast learners and they learn just soaking in information like a sponge. And some people take their sweet time. Now, it doesn't mean that the people who take their time are bad students. They just simply aren't as fast learners, and sometimes they may actually learn deeper even though they're not as quick. So we recognize that the client or the student is always on the journey. And this journey is something that we, as the coaches, have traveled. We have made certain journey along the path of enlightenment, the path of empowerment, the path of mastery. We learned a great deal, and instead of just teaching people who study with us what we've learned, we encourage them to learn. Like I already mentioned, we perceive everything as learning opportunity. So even the challenges along the way and certain pitfalls can be actually used as learning tools, which is brilliant because it means everything is a lesson. Nothing is a problem. As you travel along this path and become more and more skilled, you realize that other people who just get on the path are not as skilled as you are, but instead of just giving them your skills, you help them as a coach acquire those skills themselves, so that their skills, not your skills, it's their insight, not the outsight that you impose on them. So that's the distinction between coaching and teaching or instruction. It basically allows the recipient of coaching, which is what we refer to as a client, a coaching client or a student, to integrate much better the lessons that they learn and embody these lessons. Now, when we talk about embodiment, well, I'm talking about also a distinction between Qigong coaching as compared to most other styles of coaching. Yes, there are some styles of coaching that actually use the physical body, most often referred to as somatic coaching. And a friend of mine, Richard Straussy Heckler, is actually the founder of somatic coaching. I'm the founder of another approach to coaching called embodiment coaching. So you will hear all these different terminologies from me once in a while because basically the embodiment coaching is kind of like a missing link between the somatic coaching, which is just focuses on the physical body, and all types of coaching that don't use physical body as a tool or as a feedback mechanism. And it's crucial to have the feedback mechanism. It's crucial to be able to tap into certain resources that we have in our physical body. And, by the way, we also don't compartmentalize the physical body from the mind, which means we actually work with the whole system. And what keeps the mind and body as integrated organism, a live organism, as the life force, the energy. We call it Qi, hence the name Qigong. We actually use energy awareness to apply a certain applications of certain principles that we learn through understanding of body mechanics and movement and energy awareness and alignments, so that they affect our mind, and vice versa. Certain mental attitudes and skills can be translated into the physical body. The more it happens both ways, the more we engage the mind and body in a constant, reciprocal, and mutually beneficial process of development. And that means we are actually embodying our insights, our knowledge, and our mastery. We embody our own empowerment. We experience much greater sense of congruence when we embody our skills and knowledge. Why? Because we're walking the talk. If we're just talking about it, it's never good enough. We actually need to walk the talk. Yeah, I'm sure you know what I mean. The practice of Qigong coaching also teaches you how to tap into certain energy resources that can be found within our energy system. Again, not just mental attitudes, not just mental perspectives or certain dreams, it's also the understanding of energy that makes it possible for us to manifest things more effectively. Because for any dream to get manifested, there needs to be some energy that would support the process of manifestation. If there is no energy that supports the process of manifestation of a dream, what's the likelihood of that dream becoming manifested? Slim to none. It's not very likely that the dream is going to manifest if there is no energy supporting the manifestation of the dream. Makes sense, right? Now, if you recognize how simple and elegant this principle is, and it's one of the fundamental principles of Qigong coaching, then you can also see how we need to tap into specific energy resources that are associated with the dreams that we aspire to manifest, that are capable of supporting these dreams. And the more we identify with the way of being that is in alignment with this type of energy, the more we're capable of utilizing this energy on a consistent basis. That's another reason, by the way, why we study how to use our physical bodies in the context of Qigong coaching. Because in order to experience certain state of consciousness, it's not enough to just think of it. Yes, you can tap into specific states of consciousness by using your mind, meditating, concentrating on certain visualizations or images or memories that you may have from the past, or certain visions of the future. But once you tap into those states of consciousness, they are often very fleeting. And as soon as you change your focus or get busy with your daily life, you often may forget about that particular way of being that you try to tap into by tuning into that state of consciousness. Therefore, you will lose the access to to those energy resources associated with that way of being. In other words, you will revert to your old identity. If the old identity had the access to those energy resources, you would have been manifesting your dreams left and right by now. And the same applies to your coaching clients. If they need to access certain energy resources that are not currently available to them, they need to shift their sense of identity. Now, this goes really deep, doesn't it? You actually assist people in discovering other aspects of themselves that perhaps they were not even in touch with. You'd help them rediscover who they really are, reevaluate their values, and essentially create a new sense of identity. That sense of identity that is in alignment with the dreams and aspirations they have. And a fascinating thing happens when they do that. They often tune into that energy, they get really excited, and like I said, as soon as they get distracted or shift their focus, they lose the connection. They lose the sense of identity associated with the dreams and revert back to their old state of identity. What do? We help them develop the culture of movement associated with that new way of being, because you are the way you move. If you develop a culture of movement that is different from your old identity, that is based also on certain holding patterns in your body and the associated states of consciousness. If you shift from that old sense of identity to a new one, and you develop the culture of movement that's congruent with that new sense of identity, something amazing happens. You can maintain that state of consciousness. But like I said, you are the way you move. If you move consistently in a way that is associated with a new sense of identity, you maintain that sense of identity for as long as you move that way. That also means that every morning you have to re-establish that sense of identity associated with the dream. It means that every time you get knocked off of your track, you have to get back on it by remembering how to move that way. And so we learn how to develop a particular culture movement. I refer to it as harmonious culture movement. That would be associated with very specific states of consciousness that are particularly supportive of manifestation of harmonious dreams. Now, you can only achieve certain harmonious dreams or reach certain harmonious goals by taking harmonious steps. Taking disharmonious steps doesn't lead you to harmonious goals. So essentially, it's not the destination, it's the journey that needs to be harmonious as well. And as you travel along this harmonious journey, something amazing happens. You can actually enjoy the ride. You can actually feel like I'm in the flow right now, even though I'm not where I aspire to be by the end of the year. I don't have to wait to be happy. I don't have to wait to feel in harmony with everything. I can actually feel happy and in harmony right here, right now. And at the same time, I also know that I'm on the right track, traveling in the direction of my dreams. And essentially, the more you stay on track, the easier it gets. If you get knocked off track, it's still not a problem. Let's perceive it as another learning opportunity. It's a lesson in how to get back on track. So, as you can see, different principles actually tie together. They dovetail each other seamlessly. They also support each other in a way that each and every of these principles gets easier and easier to implement as you apply other principles. So that means that the system itself is congruent. It doesn't have internal conflicts that are pulling it apart. I also understand that it's important to practice coaching, especially when it comes to Qigong coaching, in a way that I would say people hope or they wish they would receive help from their best friends. So in other words, as a coach, you become the best friend to your coaching client. You don't have to fraternize with them, but you actually do that which even their best friends often cannot do. What am I talking about? I'm talking about empowering them to manifest and live their dreams. Sometimes people's best friends can ask them, so my friend, what are you doing this year? How are you going to make this year better than last year or any other previous years? Or what is it that you really dream of manifesting so that you would feel like you live a meaningful life? Even best friends sometimes are too shy or uncomfortable diving deep into the meaning of life or into our life's purpose. But even if they do, they often don't have the skills to keep us on track. And they don't have any reason to keep us accountable. So they may ask us once in a blue moon how things are going. But there is no accountability in that. As a coach, you provide both. The awareness of the dreams, so that the person who you work with becomes much more clear on what they dream of, making sure that the dream that they pursue is in alignment with their values. And if it's not, then they need to reevaluate the values or perhaps reconsider the dream. On the other hand, we provide accountability. If the person says, yes, I'm going to start exercising, this is beginning of the year, make New Year's resolutions, I'm going to start working out every day. And then you ask them, how is your working out going a few days later, a week later? And often they say, something came up, I couldn't really work out. Or I worked out the first couple of days, but then kind of fell off the bandwagon. Or I hurt myself, I got so excited, went gung-ho, and basically ended up being like a weekend warrior. You know, the weekend warrior syndrome is when the person is not very well trained and they just put so much effort into doing something over the weekend and then actually hurt themselves for the rest of the week or maybe even longer. Well, that's often what happens to people in the beginning of the year. They start doing something so enthusiastically that they actually either hurt themselves or experience burnout. They essentially cannot continue following this course of action that they set for themselves. If there is nobody who would keep them accountable, they're virtually always going to fall off the bandwagon. If there is somebody who would keep them accountable, and actually somebody who has the skills to motivate and inspire them and empower them to stay the course, they're much more likely to continue following this path. It's also much more likely that they will be able to benefit from following this path. And so without accountability, there is much less benefit. We will explore how to facilitate accountability and also how to maximize the benefits that people receive from coaching, because that also would allow you to become much more successful as a coach. The more people benefit from your coaching, the more successful as a coach you are, by definition. And one of the things about coaching that I want to bring up to your attention is that as a coach, you don't need to have much or any intention towards your clients. That sounds almost counterintuitive. Often people will say, wait a moment, well, aren't you going to be at least intending to influence the person so that they benefit maximum from this coaching? So I don't want to say that intention is bad and should be thrown away, but we don't want to create an intention based on an assumption that where the person is at is no good and they need to be somewhere else. Now, they may have that assumption, but we don't want to have that assumption. They may have certain ideas, dreams, aspirations to be somewhere else other than where they're at right now. But we accept them the way they are right now and recognize that there is plenty of room for improvement. So they can continue improving, but we keep accepting them. Why do we keep accepting them? So that we can pay attention to them. That's right. Acceptance is the prerequisite for attention. If you don't accept your client fully, just like if you don't accept yourself fully, there's always going to be a certain desire to fix something, to get rid of something, to make something different, purportedly better. And what we think is better is not always better for others. We don't want to operate on assumptions because preconceived ideas, they're always based on the past experiences. And we obviously don't want to dwell on the past. That's another distinction between coaching and therapy, as well as coaching and teaching, is that therapy tries to fix something that happened in the past. Teaching delivers certain knowledge that was created or gathered in the past. Coaching, on the other hand, is future-oriented. We accept the person the way they are. We utilize certain skills and apply the lessons that they learned in the past. But we actually work towards something that would happen in the future. Again, we call it the dream. And as we persist in a pursuit of that dream, we don't assume that the person will be better when they reach that dream. We actually accept them perfectly the way they are right now, and that allows us to pay attention to them. And as you can see, there is no need for intention when we can pay attention. Intention is like a projection of certain idea of what is going to be good for that person in the future, as opposed to attention, just simply paying attention to the way they are now. It doesn't mean that we don't help them to achieve something better than what they experience at the moment, but we actually accept them the way they are. Now, what happens is that we relate to them in a way that most people never experience anyone relating to them. Even when people have somebody who really loves them and cherishes them, they often still don't experience full acceptance. Why? Maybe because they don't fully accept themselves. So if we learn how to accept ourselves, it will become much easier for us to also accept our clients. So now we're talking about personal development for the coaches. We'll have the specific module dedicated to personal development. We'll actually use also the principles of dream yoga in that module that will boost your self-knowledge and awareness, and also allow you to become much more clear about your own inner nature. Knowing your inner nature allows you to connect with another person's inner nature a lot better. You know, I often use this metaphor of an iceberg, saying that what we know about ourselves, this is the tip of the iceberg, sticking above water, as compared to the huge part of the iceberg that resides underwater. But that huge part of the iceberg, the unknown aspect of our own being, is what sustains and supports the existence of that little tip. Without that huge part of the iceberg that's underwater, the tip would sink. Or in other words, the iceberg would shrink. The tip constitutes maybe 7 to 10% of the entire iceberg. So we realize that we need to tap into that part of the iceberg where most of the resources reside. We realize that our human potential is also in that part of the iceberg that's underwater, that unknown part of ourselves. And we often refer to it as dream being, the being that is dreaming up our experience as the human entity, as the human being. The dream being essentially is where we can find our human potential, and it goes even beyond human. It's actually quite fascinating how we can experience a greater sense of expansion of our identity, of our self, than most people ever experience in their lives when we start working with our dreams. It's very psychedelic, and it's also amazingly spiritually awakening. That's right. We learn how to awaken in the dream that we call daily life. Now, in order for that to happen, we need to learn how to awaken in our night dreams. And before we learn how to awaken in our night dreams, we actually learn how to awaken in our daydreams. We'll go into that a lot deeper in our module dedicated to personal development through dream yoga. But I'm just giving you a little glimpse of what lies ahead. What also lies ahead is we will have a module dedicated to business development for Qigong coaches that will help you become a very successful Qigong coach. We will go through a deeper understanding of your own motivations, how you identify yourself as an expert in a particular field or application of Qigong coaching, because you don't want to work with just everyone. You actually want to work with your best clients. So who are your best clients? Who are your ideal clients? Often referred to as avatars. And in order to know them, you actually need to know yourself. Again, by knowing yourself, you will be able to identify who your ideal clients are and will be able to appeal to them a lot easier and influence them a lot more powerfully. And last but not the least is the module of our apprenticeship program that's dedicated to deepening your Qidao skills. Obviously, you've already traveled a great deal along the path of learning our art of being in a flow, also referred to as Qidao, and you will learn a lot more about how to be in the flow and develop much greater skill set beyond anything you've learned in an advanced Qidao program and before. Of course, you will also reconnect with some of the practices that you learned in the basic, intermediate, and advanced levels of Qidao, so that they're not just living somewhere in your notebooks as the notes that you jot down. They actually will be integrated into your daily life. So we don't just learn Qidao as the Qigong style. We learn it as the Qigong lifestyle. And that's something that you will also be able to encourage and empower your coaching clients to do, to develop a lifestyle based on Qigong and the principles of energy awareness. That is going to impact their lives a lot more than just learning some Qigong moves and techniques. The last but not least, I want to come back to what we're going to cover in this particular module, in our future webinars and individual coaching sessions included in our program. We will experiment with a number of specific methods associated with developing access to energy resources that I mentioned earlier today that facilitate manifestations of our dreams. We'll also learn how to embody the certain states of consciousness and how to integrate the sense of identity based on discovering a new way of being that is associated with those energy resources that I just mentioned. We will also develop certain skills that facilitate the person's journey, helping them identify particular milestones or landmarks along their way, boosting their ability to bring together the current states of affairs and the dream states. Will also help them develop much greater self-awareness, without which nobody can really achieve much in the context of coaching. But unfortunately, development or facilitation of self-awareness is often not taught in coaching schools, which is crucial. And you will learn a few other techniques and methods that will establish you as the world-class expert in the modality of coaching that I pioneered, and often you will find yourself at the top 1% tier of coaches if you simply assess the levels of skills of other coaches around. So you will learn how to connect with other coaches, how to experience their work, and also how to share yours. And most importantly, you will learn how to coach yourself. Because when we receive coaching from others, it's really nice. But it's even more important to coach yourself so that you can consistently benefit from coaching, that you don't have to wait for a few days or a week. You actually can do it on the spot. In the context of our apprenticeship program, we will have coaching clinics where we will be able to coach members of our apprenticeship group, as well as the members of our community. So we'll invite the community members to participate in the coaching clinics, and we'll do it free of charge. Why? Because one of the requirements for your graduation and for receiving a certificate as a Qigong coach is having 50 documented Qigong coaching sessions under your belt. It may include those sessions that you give during the coaching clinics, or during the coaching clinics you can actually connect with the person who may want to benefit from your coaching and then coach them individually afterwards. We'll also be able to work with each other, and as another important part of our program, we will have apprenticeship circles, during which we will be sharing our successes related to development of certain skills, achievement of certain milestones. If we have certain projects that we're working on, we'll be able to share what we're doing. Maybe we have certain challenges that we run into and we want to share those challenges. Maybe someone in the group can help with those. Maybe somebody have certain connections or certain experiences that they would be able to share, certain leads or certain best practices. Sometimes it can be me, but often it can be another apprentice. I will participate in those apprenticeship circles, but I will not be dominating them. I will actually delegate to all the apprentices, yourself included, the opportunity to lead those apprenticeship circles, basically turning them into mastermind groups for the members of our program, which means you will actually benefit from having a mastermind group in addition to having the world-class coach by your side. That means you will actually get the double whammy, or a double benefit, so to speak. And last but not least, I will also encourage you to write down the best experience or the most interesting experiences, perhaps even the most challenging experiences that you go through. May even be some experiences you've already had in the past. Over the course of your studies with me, you might have experienced certain benefits or certain challenges overcame certain issues, I will encourage you to write down all of them so that you will be able to compose a paper that you will need to submit by the end of the apprenticeship program, by December of this year, as another prerequisite for graduation. You are actually required to submit a paper in order to graduate from this program. The paper doesn't have to be long. I will give you specific requirements in terms of the length of the paper. They're very simple. But the idea is that as you write down your own experiences, and you may also write down experiences of other people, perhaps those people who you've coached over the course of this year, you will have much greater idea about what Qigong coaching does for you or does for other people, which will make it a lot easier for you to communicate the benefits of this practice. And that means you will be much more successful in sharing good news with other people about your availability as a Qigong coach and what that would do for them if you started working with them in that capacity. I will support you on this journey as much as humanly possible, and I also look forward to continue our journey together. If you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to email me or text me or call me. You know how to get a hold of me. And also bring up those questions or comments or requests during your coaching sessions with me. Until then, namaste.